evening and a wonderful audience. We've spent a little bit of time today, traveling across the state. And the crowds have been big and enthusiastic. I think they said there were 4,000 people there. Our job is to translate this enthusiasm and get some delegates out of this thing. It is wonderful, the reception we're getting, and it's across the country. And I think there's a real need for something different. And I think people are recognizing that the system that we've had, not for the past 3 years, I go after our president as much as anybody else, but it isn't the last 3 years that brought us to this crisis. And the last administration was far from my favorite, let me tell you. But it didn't occur there. It's occurred over a long time. Liberties aren't lost overnight. And we have changed our foreign policy, we've changed our monetary policy, we've changed our fiscal policy and our spending policy and entitlement system, the welfare state, and it didn't occur overnight. The freedoms that we've lost have been eroded, and it's gradual and steady. But now we're at a crisis point. There's not much more to lose, because when a president announces that he can assassinate American citizens, and the Congress can give him the power to arrest all Americans anytime, any place, we're coming desperately close to saying that we're losing, if we haven't lost already, our republic. So it's time to stand up. The American people are waking up. They're letting the message be heard. Unfortunately, Washington, most of Washington, other candidates, are pretty much sleeping. They don't know what we're talking about. And I think the message has to be loud and clear and make sure they hear us. We went in the wrong direction at least 100 years ago. You know, 1913 wasn't exactly a good year. Not only did we have the income tax thrown on our lap, something I would like to get rid of, I'd like to repeal the 16th Amendment. It violated the advice of the founders and the very strong position in the Constitution about monetary issues. The founders said that because they had gone through runaway inflation with the continental dollar, they said that only gold and silver can be legal tender. It's still on the books. It's been on. It also said that you couldn't print paper money. It said no emitting of bills of credit. But they don't emit bills of credit. They don't print. Well, they print a lot, but they just create it by the computer. They can create $1 trillion a week if they want, and they literally did that. They generated $15 trillion worth of bailout money and credit during the crisis a few years ago. Not only did it bail out the people who didn't deserve to get bailed out in this country, they bailed out foreign banks and foreign countries and foreign central banks. And it's the monetary system that is at fault, and the burden falls on the American people. It falls especially on the middle class. It falls on the poor. And there's a transfer of wealth and there's a transfer of power. It is not representative of what a republic is supposed to be. So we have to fight for and get people to understand that a true republic honors, respects individual liberty and sound money. Responsibility to protect the value of the money, and they've been in business for 99 years right now, and they've lost 99% of the value of the dollar they have. And that's not a very good record. And the other mandate the Fed has is they're supposed to maintain high employment. They haven't done very well there. But I think we should celebrate next year. I think we should have a bill and pass a bill. If I'm there, I'll be very glad to sign it. And that is the celebration of 100 years of the Federal Reserve. We're going to repeal the Federal Reserve Act. Along with the introduction of the method how they undermine the wealth of the middle class, whether it's through taxation or through inflation, It also introduced the age of endless wars, and we've been fighting wars ever since, but also the entitlement system. The entitlement system is something that we have to address, and it's been around for quite a bit, especially starting in the Depression, the Great Society, and now what we're getting now. It's endless, and it's not one party, it's a bipartisan effort. They sometimes tell me, well, you know, if you win the presidency, how are you going to bring groups together? How are you going to compromise? I said, I think that's our problem. We've been compromising too much. Both left and right get together and they fight the wars. Both right and left undermine our liberties. Both right and left spend too much money to run the welfare state. So what we need to do is bring coalitions together from the people who are on the left, don't like war and protect civil liberties. Bring the people together on the right and say, I like economic liberty and sound money. We need to bring the people together and change this back to what we used to have, and that was a true republic. The entitlement system is something that is misnomered because entitlements sound like you deserve it. And I do believe that, you know, under a system of what Jefferson talked about, you know, we have our rights. Our rights come to us in a natural way. We're you know, entitled to a right to our life and a right to our liberty. We ought to have a right and entitled to the fruits of our labor. But today, entitlement means that people, a certain segment of society, and it's nearly about half, that they are entitled to the wealth of the other half. And it doesn't work very well because right now there are more people entitled to the other half. The other half is shrinking, and the wealth is dwindling. And the production is down. There's no other state in the country that probably understands it better. The jobs aren't here. The jobs are going overseas. In the last 10 years, there has been a 30 million increase in our population. Essentially no new manufacturing jobs. And we're now a debtor nation. Now you say, well, why didn't we have all this trouble 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago? We were so wealthy because a free society is the wealthiest society. We had the largest middle class. And it takes a long time to undermine and spend the wealth and borrow to the hilt. But we're at a different point now. Because now, with all the consumption without the production, we are a debtor nation. We are the biggest debtor nation in the history of the world. We owe more money to foreigners than any other country has. We owe, in our national debt, $16 trillion. We owe foreigners $3 trillion, and we can't pay the bills. It's a debt crisis. And you know what they think in Washington? Almost everybody, some talk differently, but if anybody was serious in Washington and understood this with the debt crisis, wouldn't you think they ought to cut something? You know, some spending? We should cut the budget by $1 trillion. About five departments and reverse our spending levels back about 5 years. Instead, they have projected increases forever and ever. So they talk a little bit about cutting, and they say, well, yeah, we spend too much here, too much there. So the Congress tries to do something, and they flunk, and they say, well, we've got a super committee. Dump it on the lap of the super committee, and they made a super mess out of the whole thing. They didn't do anything. But then there was some automatic cuts. The automatic cuts just sounds wonderful. $1.2 trillion, that used to be a lot of money. And they're going to cut $1.2 trillion out of the budget over the next 10 years, but we're not allowed to start until 2013.